If you own property in Arizona, whether it's a home, land, or commercial building, you have probably seen that annual property tax notice arrive and wonder, how exactly did they come up with this number? Additionally, over the years, we have received emails and calls from our investors asking us about how the Arizona taxes are levied and what does it mean that Arizona taxes are paid in arrears. In this video, I'm going to give you a basic knowledge on how Arizona property taxes work. We'll talk about how properties are valued, what determines your bill, and what you can do if you think your valuation is too high. By the end, you will understand your property tax statement and feel confident knowing where those numbers come from. Let's start with the foundation, the county assessor's office. Every county in Arizona has an assessor, and their job is to determine the value of all taxable property each year. Every property gets an assessor's parcel number, or APN, which is basically your property ID number. It's like your fingerprint. That APN connects to everything: the parcel, map, the legal description, ownership record, and valuation history. The APN number is a 3-digit, 2-digit, 3-digit number. These numbers stand for book, map, and parcel number in the assessor's records. Sometimes this number is followed by a letter. The letter tells us that that said lot was further subdivided. For example, if you see a letter C after the APN number, we can assume that lot was subdivided into 3 lots, and you are reviewing the 3rd lot in the subdivided parcel, A, B, and C. When you visit your county assessor's website, whether it's Maricopa, Pima, or any other county, you can look up your property by the APN number, by the address, or the owner's name. You will see key details like ownership information, the property's class, and 2 important numbers: full cash value, or FCV, limited property value, or LPV. Those 2 numbers are the starting point for your property taxes. The full cash value, or FCV, is the assessor's estimate of your property's market value, what they believe your property would sell in the open market based on data, cost models, and sales in the area. However, that number isn't always the same as what your home or property would actually sell for. Historically, the full cash value is often 20 to 40% below true market value because the assessor uses mass appraisal models rather than individual inspections. Kind of like Zillow. We all know how accurate Zillow estimates or value are, right? The limited property value, or LPV, is different. This is the number that actually determines your property taxes. In 2012, Arizona passed the Proposition 117, which limited annual tax increase to 5%. It was created to prevent big spikes in taxable value during rapidly appreciating markets. Prior to 2015, Arizona property taxes were calculated based on full cash value, the FCV, and after 2015, Arizona moved from full cash value computation to limited property value. It is important to know that LPV can never exceed FCV, but regardless, by law, your LPV can only increase by up to 5% per year, unless you make significant improvements, add new structures, or split or combine parcels. Let's see an example for increasing the market value and declining market value. Let's say in 2025, the property had an FCV and LPV of $1 million. Very nice property. Let's say in 2026, the assessor estimates the new FCV to be $1.1 million. That will be a hot market with quick value appreciation. In this situation, the limited property value would only increase by $50,000 to $1,050,000 because, like we said before, the LPV can only increase by 5% annually. So even though your property new assessed market value for 2026 went up by $100,000, your LPV increased only by $50,000, or 5% of that previous year full cash value. Let's now compare these numbers to the market that is depreciating in value. If 2025 full cash value was $1 million and it decreased to to $900,000 in the year 2026, the LPV that is being used to calculate new taxes would also decrease to $900,000. Why? Because the LPV cannot exceed the full cash value. Now that we have a better understanding of what the correlation between the full cash value and the limited property value, let's pause and talk about how the actual taxes are calculated. As you may now remember, Arizona property taxes after year 2015 are based solely off of the limited property value, or the LPV. Full cash value and the limited property value may go up and down depending on the market, but how does they correlate with your actual taxes? You may have received a notice from an assessor showing that your next year limited property value went down, and you may go, honey, I think next year we're going to pay less property taxes. Well, not necessarily. How are the taxes in Arizona calculated? It will depend on your property class, the assessment ratio, and the tax rate. Remember these points as we will go back to this shortly. Each type of property in Arizona is assigned a legal class that determines how much of your limited property value is actually taxed. Here are the few of the most common ones. Class 3, which is owner-occupied residential properties, they usually tax at 10% of the LPV. Class 4, non-owner occupied residential or rental properties, also around 10%. Class 1, commercial and industrial properties are taxed around 18% of that limited property value. This assessed value is what gets multiplied by the tax rate to calculate your bill. Here's the basic formula for Arizona property taxes computation. We take the limited property value, or the LPV, you multiply it by assessment ratio that will depend on the class, and that gives us your assessed value. Then we take the assessed value and we multiply that by tax rate, and that's gonna come up with your annual property taxes. Let's put that into an example. We have our simple home LPV of $1 million. Multiply that by 10%, the residential assessment ratio, that gives you an assessed value of $100,000. If the local combined tax rate, which includes county, city, school, and special districts, is, let's say, 8%, multiply that $100,000 by 8%. That equals $8,000 in annual property taxes. Now, those tax rates vary by location and are determined each year by local government and school districts. So even if your property's value stays flat, your tax bill could still change if those local tax rates go up or down. Let's talk about the notice of value for a moment. As discussed previously, you will receive your notice of value in the mail from your county assessors around January. If it's the year 2026, the notice will be for the upcoming year 2027 and will list your property's full cash value, limited property value, property class, assessment ratio, and finally, the assessed value. If you review your notice and believe your value is too high, you have 60 days from the mail date to file an appeal. You're not appealing the tax itself, you're appealing the value used to calculate your taxes. To appeal, you will need evidence like comparable sales, recent appraisals, or information about property's condition. If the assessor agrees with you, your value and ultimately your taxes can be adjusted. If they don't, however, you can take it to the County Board of Equalization, and in rare case, you can take it up to the tax court. Arizona property taxes are based on a calendar year, but they're billed semi-annually. First half of your taxes covers January 1st through June 30th and is due on October 1st. The first half of your taxes becomes delinquent on November 1st, so just 1 month later. The second half covers July 1st through December 31st and isn't due until the March 1st of the following year. Second half becomes delinquent on May 1st or 2 months after March due date of the same year. This is an important date because on this day, the taxes for the whole year become delinquent. If taxes go unpaid, they begin to accrue interest at 16% annually. The interest is computed and charged monthly, so if you divide 16% by 12 months, you will arrive at around 1.33% rate of interest per month. That is a big penalty, so it's always better to pay on time or set up an escrow payments through your mortgage lender. Now, there is one way to have your interest on your delinquent taxes waived. Let's say your first half taxes are $5,000, and if not paid by November 1st, the taxes due for the first half become delinquent and the interest of 16% begins to accrue. If the owner comes anytime between November 1st and December 31st and pays taxes for the entire year, not just the first half, the entire interest due will be waived. It must be paid before December 31st though, and it must be paid in full year taxes. Here is something to really remember if you fail to pay your property taxes. The authorities will not notify you about your delinquency until sometimes between August and September after your second half of taxes are due, which is May 1st. Once you receive the notice, it will just simply state that if taxes are not paid, the lien on your property will be sold at public auction. So to recap, your property's value is determined each year by your county assessor. Full cash value estimates market value, while limited property value determines your taxable value. Property class determines how much of that value is taxed. Your tax rate comes from local governments and school districts, and your total property tax is simply the assessed value multiplied by that tax rate. If you understand these key steps, you will never look at your property tax bill the same way again.